and welcome back to my channel, Good Grief with Diva. I am your host, Diva. And before we jump into this amazing day, I've got a special guest. I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button, and if it so resonates with you, send this to a friend who might need it. There are magical things that come up in all these episodes, and I have no doubt that this one will be any different. I'm excited to introduce Jocelyn. We have Jocelyn Bates here, and Jocelyn is a cultivator of curiosity in the human experiment. I think that is the best opening line of any bio I have ever read. She is a soul art guide, Akashic Records guide, yoga nidra guide, and human design mentor. She is also an expressive arts therapist intermodal and an EFT master practitioner. She has been working with people for over 25 years in different capacities to help them find their authenticity and purpose in life. 2.5 years ago, she lost her parents 7 days apart, and she's been traveling through her grief ever since. The journey of grief has widened her lens, honed her creativity, and brought into perspective her life's story. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's jump into what stood out to me, and especially as somebody who deals specifically with grief and psychic mediumship. You lost your parents within such a short time of each other. And I think that is everyone's worst nightmare.
Yeah, and actually, as you were reading it, because it's just been up in the air. Because let's see, this Sunday, for me, it's like a month of every anniversary. Because it's when everyone got sick, and then when my mom went in the hospital, when my dad went in the hospital, when my mom died, when my dad died, when the funeral happened. So it's like a month. It's like a full month, and it's actually coming up on Monday. It'll be 3 years that the whole scenario starts again for me. And yeah, it was totally unexpected. I'm an only child. I was living with my parents, with my family, my kids and my husband. So they were like second parents to my kids. And yeah, and it just came out of nowhere. They just had gotten off of it was 2021. So in 2020, they had their 50th anniversary, but they couldn't go anywhere. So they had gone off and just come back from like a trip to Atlantic City. And then just everyone got COVID and got sick. And now they didn't die of COVID, but they died in the hospital from different protocols and treatments. And actually my mom died. My dad left. He didn't want to be here without my mom, and left that to me. So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I went into a lot of shock and dissociation and PTSD for quite some time. Well, maybe 4 or 5 months. And then I just slowly began unpacking,
Yeah.
unraveling.
And that's often the case. Even when people there is some expectation that death is imminent.
Yeah.
There's still that immediate shock, right? Because even though we consciously know it's coming, if someone is sick and we've anticipated that will be the final outcome, there's still that period of shock because no matter how much preparation we do, we're never fully ready for that moment.
No, when it's not there anymore, right? Yeah, and it's funny, I was working on a book on grief before my parents died. And because I've had a stillbirth, I've had a lot of friends pass away, people I've known have passed away. And so I was writing a book on grief, and I was doing writing and art. And about 3 weeks before everything happened, I had said to my friend, this grief thing it's sometimes so hard, because I was pulling up stuff from a while back. And I said, if I ever lost my parents, I don't think I'd survive. And then 3 weeks later, they die 7 days apart. And it was totally out of nowhere. They were healthy, holistic people that, yeah, it was. And there was other little things, like my mom about a month before was like, I just want you to know, in case your father and I die together, I want you to know where our paperwork is. Like all of these little things. My mother had bought this journal for my daughter, who was going to be she's turning 15 now. So she was turning 12. Yeah. Yeah. 12. And my mom was she loved buying journals for people and books and stuff. And so she had bought one for my daughter, and she had called me up. Her birthday was August 25th. So sometime in June or like May. She was really thinking about it. I want to get this journal for my granddaughter. I need you to look at it. And so I'm like, anything you pick is going to be perfect. Like she was a great person. Anything you pick. And normally she would have picked some like abstract art or a tree of life or something. And then it never showed up. It never came. And it was like an Amazon thing. It was supposed to come in 3 days or like a week or something. And it never came. And she had ordered it in like May or June. My daughter's birthday came. She was really stressing out about it. She was like, I don't know why it didn't come while we were gone. I don't know. And about 20 minutes after she died, it came in the mail. And it was a journal that my mother would have never bought. It was a sentimental to my granddaughter. If I'm ever not here, you know that I'll have you in my heart. And it came literally 20 minutes after my mom died on the day she died. And like we thought it was like a goner, right?
Especially if it had taken that much time to get there.
Hmm.
Part of me wants to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've had experiences with clients that I've done readings for where there has been similar sentiment where people are like, here's this just in case something happens. And to me, it always tickles my spidey senses go up that part of me wonders if that intrinsic spirit within us, that soul within us, intrinsically knows. There's a knowing,
Right?
even like the human part of us doesn't.
Yeah, there's not a part of us here that's, oh yeah, this is why. It's just, it was an instinct or an impulse in a moment. And she caught me in a moment. And I was like,
Yes.
what are you doing? And I didn't think anything of it until months later.
Yeah.
Didn't even think anything of it. But yeah, like almost like she knew, but didn't know. Yeah.
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 Like even preparing you in case anything happens, here's the paperwork. And you saying, I can't even imagine living without my parents.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost on a soul level. It was a preparation on a very unconscious level.
Yeah. And you don't even put two and two together till after. It's I had no thought of it at the time. It was just like, but then after when I came out of being so dissociated and I have no memories for 4 or 5 months. I like coming out of that when I started to begin to unpack and peel and unlayer, that's when I was like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
this was all in front of me." It was almost like the notion was being planted, not in a big way, just a little
Hmm.
seed thrown like here and there.
Yeah. I had similar experiences dealing with my brother's death. He unalived himself. We can't say the S word on YouTube. And I, like you, I was dissociated for about a year afterwards. But the night he died, I was playing a game. I couldn't sleep. I was having a bout of insomnia. So I was on a girls' weekend in Montreal and my friend was asleep. I couldn't sleep. I, when I looked at the clock, it was 4:30 and I was playing a game that was called no, 1001 Ways to Die,
Oh,
which I, I don't know why at that. I don't know. It's not really a game that I would normally play. It just happened to be on my phone. I was checking it out. And there was an instant where the character, you are having to save this character from multiple ways of dying.
yeah.
Gotta get rid of the bird. It's popping the balloon so it doesn't fall. And so there was this one where he got hit by a train. And I remember being startled. I remember seeing that it was 4:30 and I threw my phone across the room.
Mhm.
And I didn't think anything of it. And it, like you said, it wasn't until you started to unpack.
Yeah.
My brother died, and his choice was to lie down in front of a train. And he died at 4:30 was the coroner's report.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, was there
It was a
something?
connection of some kind, right? There was
Yeah.
information being given.
And I didn't
No.
make the connection until I was telling somebody. And then I was like, oh my, oh my God.
Yeah. Because it's
Right?
just in the moment, it's just something that's happening because you have no context for it. You don't
Exactly.
have the context to put it into.
No.
And I had something similar happen when my grandfather died when I used to travel into New York City to go to school, and I was getting dropped off one day, And my grandfather was in the hospital, but I must have been in a weird state of mind. I wasn't awake totally or anything. And as I got out of the car, then I got back in the car. And my mother at the time, this was years ago, was like, why are you getting back in the car? Your train's coming. I'm like, we're going to the funeral, right? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm not going to go if we're going to the funeral. And he had died the moment I got back into the car. Like when I shut the door and got out of the car, and then he died. And then as I opened the door and got back in, and nobody knew that. We didn't get the call because it was so early in the morning because I had to go into New York City. So we didn't get the call until my mother thought I was insane until a little later. And it was at that moment that I stepped out of the car. So like these
Yeah.
things, like we have these impulses when we start to follow our flow, but we don't have the context. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so crazy. I just haven't woken up yet. I'm going to go get some coffee. And then I'm in school and my mother's, are you kidding me? It's like, we just don't have the context yet to understand it.
No, and I
Yeah.
think the more we start to dive into our connection to spirituality, and I want to be clear, anybody watching, spirituality is very different than religion. I'm not talking religion. I'm not talking any sort of organized religion. I'm talking when we tap into our intuitiveness and we tap into that part of us, that becomes regular. We
Yeah.
start seeing that on a regular basis and identifying those things. And I think that's what's so magical when we do tap into that
Yeah.
is it's this feeling of connected to something greater than ourselves. And people may want to call that God or universe or source energy, whatever it is. It's that feeling of being connected. And I think that's such an important thing to strive towards for everybody. I think it helps us face such things as grief when there's that void or when there's that loss, when we can intrinsically tap back in and understand our process and what's to come through that grief journey. So, what was it that sparked the unpacking? Because you said it was about 4 months for you in
Yeah.
shock. And you don't remember those first 4 months. What was it that started to hurdle you forward?
I think just instinctively, because for me, so my mom died on the 10th, my dad died on the 17th, the 23rd was the funeral, the 8th of October was my dad's birthday, then there's Halloween, which we always celebrated with my parents, Thanksgiving, Christmas, my mom's birthday was the 8th of January, and my birthday was the 25th. And my birthday, I always celebrated my mom. So there was just this long list of every other week I'm being reminded in a really big way. And we lived in the house, so we're still in the house. We just have totally ghosted the area where they lived. Do you know, it's like there was just so much going on that I just couldn't do it through the holiday. And when I
Yeah.
started, and
So,
of course I had to be on the emails because when you have parents die, you have to move everything. They're so close that people don't know how to deal with it in the business world in the same way. It's not as easy. They have to get their managers and so because you have to move the money so many times, or you have to get the debt so many times moved over. It's really crazy. But
yeah.
I had to go onto my mother's email. And I went onto my mother's email and I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on because I've been off. I'm not really paying attention to anything. And I had introduced my mom to somebody in human design years ago. And I had noticed while I was in her email that she was getting like more than daily emails from this person. And she was very interested in. And then I noticed she had a bunch of her classes on her computer. And so I was like, I had an impulse then. And I was like, and that's when it started me following, like starting this following. Like, I'm going to
Mm.
have an impulse. Okay, before I think about it, I'm just going to write to this woman. And so I wrote to her and I just let my fingers go. It was like, I lost my mom and I really need to be near her. And she loved you. And I have no money. Everything's in the thing. I really need to take this class that you have coming up. I just saw that she had the Heal Your Witch Wound through Human Design class. And I said, I really want to do this. I think I need it. And she was like, boom, scholarship, you're in. And that started the the process because it was such a beautiful container of women and quantum alignment with EFT tapping and really learning about who I am, really working through having not had memories for 4 or 5 months, being able to do that with a group of women. And it was like, it was it was at least twice a week for 6 months. You had quarter moons, full moons, new moons. And then you also had these resiliency keys and working through all of that. And then when that ended, I was like, oh, shit. I have nothing to keep me like here again. And I knew that I don't know if human design, I'm a 4-1. So if I keep myself and
Mhm.
as a student, yeah. So I'm a quad right. Turns out my dad was a quad right. I didn't learn until he left, like till he went to the other side. But I'm like a quad right 4-1 juxtaposition of fantasy, pure generator. So like I have this following thing started to become really natural to me. And as soon as that ended, I'm like, no one's going to hold me accountable and I'm just going to go off the deep end again. So I immediately reached out to, I did a little bit of research. I reached out to another human design person and I said, and as soon as the impulse happened and I found the person, I didn't pay attention. I didn't let my mind think because I would never ask somebody to get me into a program, but I had nothing. Like we were literally scrounging for everything because everything was in the lawyers and the house and we were trying to pay the bills. And I wrote, I need to take this and I don't know what to do. And I'm really asking for if I could maybe, I need to be in something. And I told her my story and she's, yeah, your scholarships. And it was like an $8,000 program. It was like an amazing program. She let me in and it was literally like 3 times a week. So I had this accountability again. And I was
Mhm.
and I was learning about myself and human design as I did this. So I was also learning about my parents' charts. I was learning about my kids' charts. I was learning how the whole family constellation of charts was working out in that way. And then
Mhm.
I ended up going into one of her programs and she had an Akashic Records guide.
Mhm.
It was like my mom, I swear she whispered in everybody's ear the entire time.
I was just gonna say there was a lot of guidance from your parents in that. So
Yeah.
just to tap into this a little bit before we sat down, when I was preparing for our call, there were 2 spirits that came through, and we can talk about it in a little bit. But there's one that came through, and I got 2 as 1. 2 meaning 2 spirits together.
Yeah.
They're together. And so my instinct is that it's your parents, and we can do more in confirming that. But I'm getting the nudge that they were orchestrating all this,
Yeah.
understanding the overwhelm that was for you and their parting and what that put on you. They were orchestrating these things happening for you.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely.
The Mickey Mouse
Oh, yeah.
plantation
The
thing?
Disney, the original one. My parents
Yeah.
actually bought that for my kids. Yeah, the
Okay.
DVD set.
And maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they're showing it to me and their
Yeah.
orchestration to connect it to you so that you would know.
Yeah,
Gosh, I had
yeah. Yeah, and what happened was it just that ball kept rolling. I ended up doing this Akashic Records session, ending up in a past life from a meditation. I was like, I need to talk to this woman because I don't want to end up here again, but I also am so totally intrigued. And the minute I talked to her, she's, you're meant to be an Akashic Records guide. I'm gonna offer this to you. Please come and do it. And I was like, okay, because it was right when the other human design thing ended. And then as I finished the Akashic Records guide training, I ended up in panic attacks because it was the first winter that I was not dissociated and my kids got sniffles. And I would be literally, I would not be able to sleep. I would pray over them, please don't die. Because that's how it started. Started with, and I couldn't sleep. And because I wasn't sleeping, I got even more anxious. And because I was more anxious, I wasn't sleeping. And I went on this, and somehow my phone turned on Insight Timer and I found a teacher that I really liked. Within a month of just listening to her yoga nidras, I absolutely like, I was better than before. And I said, "Oh, I gotta reach out to her." So I reach out to her. I'm just like, "I just gotta tell you," like a review, right? I'm like, "I just have to tell you, you have saved my life, and I have to tell you how you did it." And before I could finish, she's, "Please take my training." Like, it was insane. It was just over and over again. And finally, I started to have a little bit of money again it took 2.5 years almost. And then I decided to work in soul art for myself. This was my gift to myself now. But, like,
right.
it was my mother and maybe my father too, yeah, were just I felt like they were whispering in everyone's ears, and they weren't letting me have too much downtime. Because when I started to have down and it wasn't that it wasn't downtime like I wasn't busy. It was like I never had more than 2 weeks where I wasn't asked to go inward, like, to show up for myself. And through this whole time, one thing that did happen when I was a bit dissociated was my mom had a friend and worked with somebody who was a soul shaman. And when she died, she was the first person I went to, and she worked on me for 3, 4 hours. Right in the beginning, and then we became friends, and I feel like she's like a mother to me, and she's been teaching me soul shamanism as we go as well. I've just had this support. Whereas my entire family just disappeared. So it's really just me and my kids and my husband. But I have different people who have come in. I had a lot of friends that left, couldn't handle it. And my kids' friends, their parents took them away because they couldn't, because my at the time I had a 4-year-old, and everyone she talked to, the first thing she would be like, are your grandparents alive? Because she was like a soulmate to my dad. If there was ever a soul connection, like those two had it. And it wasn't like she was saying it to be mean, but she got so curious. Anytime she wanted to talk to somebody, she would bring up death. And I encouraged it. It's go for it. Talk about it. It's life. It's life and death and whatever it is. But a lot of people got uneasy and they took their kids out of our lives. So it was like we got very just put on an island. Do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
I
was an
think that's
interesting time.
common in grief from my own experience, from, people to it. I kind of tongue in cheek say it, but there's truth behind it. It's almost like people treat it like it's contagious.
Yeah.
Oh,
Especially with the
that's
COVID protocols and stuff.
But yes, that exacerbated it more. But
Yeah.
I think, and especially with how my brother died as well,
Oh,
there's this mentality of, oh no, we can't talk about it. If we talk about it, it's like cursing ourselves. And so we can't talk about it.
yeah.
And the person going through it desperately needs to talk about it. That's how they walk through it. And there's so many people retreated. And what they don't understand in doing that, and I realize it's self-preservation, but it's just an added loss for the person who's already in grief. I lost my two best friends
Yeah.
after my brother died.
Yeah.
The
That's
people
what
I
happened.
needed the most.
To be there.
And
That
poof,
happened to me too.
gone.
And on top of it, I lost 3/4 of my hair and 7 teeth broke in 2 days. Just throw me everything all at once.
Oh my gosh.
I had them for the funeral, but I had a funeral. No one showed up because they all were afraid to come, so they all came on Zoom. But like my parents were neighbors growing up. So my families know each other, and one of them is 6 kids, the other one's 5 kids. I have tons of cousins. Not one. My ex-boyfriend showed up with his sister-in-laws.
I was going to
There's
say the next thing in that is that sometimes there are people that come out of the woodwork that you
They
least
do.
that
And you're
show up.
like, yeah, and you're like, wow, like this person actually does truly love me for who I am. And they're going to
Yeah.
be here regardless. Yeah.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
my brother died, there were people that I went to like middle school and high school whom I hadn't seen since then, who came because they had heard or read that my brother had died. And I was shocked, and pleasantly so, that they would come and support me that way. And even at the funeral, my brother's childhood best friend came, and he's a big name actor. He was in the eulogy. I didn't know he was there. And so in saying it, and then he came to me afterwards, and it was the last thing I was expecting for him and his
Yeah.
parents both to show up.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was such a touching moment for my mom and I because it represented the best part of my brother's childhood. They really did see my brother for the wonderful person that he was, and did
Was.
so much to validate him and raise him up. And to see them there, like there was no expectation whatsoever. We hadn't seen them since they were children. And so to see them there and to come and support us, that was shocking. And yet the people who should have been there, some of them.
Maybe if they would have been, it would have just frustrated you. I don't know.
Well, and that could
But
be.
in the end, maybe you
Mhm.
just didn't need it to heal.
And that's exactly it. And my mom and I have talked at nauseum about, we lost most of our family. I lost family on both sides, most of my aunts and uncles. And first, it was very traumatic, but I now look at it as a gift, because really that separation and breaking those relationships was breaking the chains as well. And it allowed
Yeah.
my mom and I to step out of these
Yeah.
toxic cycles and really allowed us to heal.
I love
And
that.
for that, we
Love
are
that.
grateful, which is hard for people to understand, but we are. We look
Yeah.
at it as a gift.
I don't understand it in the same way. But so when my mom died, it was so unexpected. And she always said she never went to a hospital. She always said, I'm going to die in a hospital. And I had to send her to the hospital. But I had no idea what was going to happen. If I did, I would have just let her die at home, and I would have laid at home with her because I wasn't allowed to see. It was COVID protocol. So I wasn't allowed to see her. My dad, no one was contacted with me. It was really just awful. But I did get to go in once. And when I went in, they wheeled my dad in, who was actually had a release date. He just fell, but they put him in the COVID unit. And they had a plexiglass box around him that had a door on it. And he couldn't even hug her or kiss her or anything. He could just hold her hand. And he said to me at the time, and I didn't even, I don't even think he knew what was happening because no one could get in touch with him because he had to answer his phone. But there was the COVID time, so no one was doing anything. And he said, "God, she's suffering." And he said maybe 2 or 3 sentences to me, and then they kicked us out before my mom died, even though I begged to stay. They kicked both my dad out and me, and then my dad had to go. I wasn't even allowed to go with him. That was the last time I was allowed to see anyone. And when I got home, my dad called me and he said, "This world is yours now." And then that night, or I think between the night and the morning, his oxygen just plummeted. It's like his body just was like, "I'm done now." Oxygen plummeted, but what they did was they put the oxygen masks on. And then because he was trying to take them off, they restrained him. And I had to make the choice. Now I knew my dad. I know my dad. I know what he wanted. Um, and I would not let anything get in the way of that. And when I asked them to take the restraints off, they said the only way is if you put him on hospice. And so I made that choice, but I did contact my aunts and uncles because in that time, I know I'm his daughter, but those are his brothers and sisters. And I said, I don't want to make this decision. I want to let you know what's going on. I didn't have to. I felt like it was the right thing to do. But I
Yeah.
think because I did that, a few of my aunts and uncles believe I murdered my dad by taking him and putting him on a hospice. So, there is a hostility there that hasn't been addressed, but they just don't ever reach out. Like, it's like they haven't talked to me since everything happened. But so I'm pretty sure I'm only guessing, but I feel this like a little bit of even the Christmas after my parents died, I was told that the whole family had a Christmas party, and then I was told by one of my aunts, you weren't invited because it would have been too sad, but I'm pretty sure it's because they didn't want me who killed my dad there. Like that.
Yeah. And the thing is, that should have been your choice to make if it was going to be too sad.
Yeah.
There goes that excuse.
Yeah. But it's
Right.
that same, like, he chose it.
Yeah.
And that was also like a piece of me. I knew I had to follow it when he called me and told me that I knew it was going to happen. And I had to, that was the first healing I did. Was
Mm.
I was so mad at him to leave me. I was even mad that he left my kids, like my youngest, who was his soulmate, like she was only 4 or
Yeah.
3, 4. Yeah. So there, that was the first work I did. And that took, I'm still in it, but that original work took a year just to get through that. And then you made me do it, Dad. There
Yeah.
was also that level of it. You made me make the choice for you. I never wanted to make that choice.
Yeah.
And there was a lot there. But it's all in forgiveness, and I feel them around all the time, all the time. Just, like I was just telling you before, just today, I had a bee that always signifies my dad for me. And it's just sitting there. I don't know how slow its wings were going. It was literally stagnant in front of me. And any which way I turned, it was like in my face. And then a feather I'm sitting outside, just lands on my leg. There's nothing above me. There was no like bird that I saw, but just lands on my leg. Like I feel them all the time.
Yeah. That's a good indication for those listening who might be curious. Those are significant ways that our loved ones communicate with us. And for each person, it can be different. There's similarities. And I even tell people, ask for specific signs. Ask for something that will represent for you so that you know when you see it.
Yeah.
Trust your instincts when it does come. When you think, I feel my dad or I feel that person, trust that instinct because 99.999% of the time you're correct. And it's so magical when we open ourselves up to those possibilities of communication, but that's such a valid way for spirits to communicate. And I love that both of those things happen today, especially as we were meeting today,
Yeah.
have this conversation, right? I don't believe in coincidence. And so it's such a beautiful message that they're there and they're
Yeah.
part of this with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I felt them from the very beginning. They've been with me in my dreams. I've been very like lucidly, like knowing I'm awake, dreaming, and had very strong messages from each of them. And
Yeah.
like I was even saying last night, I was on a shaman journey, and that actually they told me they're ready for me to learn a bit of light language, and they're going to be giving it to me. They're going to be teaching me, and I'll know when it starts. So I'm like, okay, but something about singing and writing songs and having light language in it, and I was like, okay, this is totally new. avenue for me, but we'll see.
Channel away. You are the vessel.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I want to ask you because there's two interesting things that you do that I think is interesting to bring up to anybody watching. And that's your work in human design. Because I know I'm just new at hearing
Yeah.
it. I don't understand it fully. I have a friend who's in it and she's given me some ideas about me. I think I'm a manifesting generator. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. There's generator, manifestor, projector, and reflector.
Okay.
But yeah, manifesting generator. Yeah.
And then also the Akashic Records, I think I'd love to tap into because I think it's a word that those of us in the, as I call the woo space, we know and understand, or at least have a vague idea of what it is. But I think it's new to a lot of people. So can we touch on those two things?
Yeah. As far as the Akashic Records go, I seem to be seeing it around more often. I don't know if it's sometimes when you're like so in the space, I'm like, is it just my own mirror going off that I'm just attracting it, or is it happening in the larger world? Like I never really know for sure. But
Hmm.
the Akashic Records is something that when I first found them, it was through meditation. Like I said, I was in a human design and they were bringing Akashic Records in. And I did not find my library. I went immediately into a past life and it was like that same lucid dream. I was awake. I was listening to her voice and I was in a past dream and in a past life. And in this past life, it was the 60s and it was a VW bus and I was pregnant with twins and both were stillborn and they were still inside my body. And I got so freaked out that I had death in my body. I was also dealing with this. Remember, this is not even a year after my grief. So I've had a stillbirth myself as well. And I had all of this going on and I like almost felt trapped. And then she pulled us out of it. And as I came out of it, I hadn't realized, but I was like bawling. My eye, just everything was soaking wet, like the grief that was coming up from that. And it was such an intense experience. I
Hmm.
don't think most people's first Akashic Records experiences are like that, but that I had to go to her. And I had no idea what the Akashic Records were before. No idea. Would have been like, I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But they're that dimension of pure knowledge that we access in different ways. Certain people access it through meditation, certain people access it through their clair abilities, some people access it through lucid dreaming, right? There's different ways to access it. And everyone has an Akashic record, everybody, every living being and every living thing, like every blade of grass has its own Akashic record. You go in your house and every piece of wood that's used to put your house together was once a living tree. So it has an Akashic record. And that's the limitlessness of the Akashic records. But you go
Yeah.
into them for knowledge. You go into them to learn, to research, to understand. You don't go into the divine. You're not going in as a medium.
Hmm.
But it's an awesome, beautiful place to learn about your past lives, your future lives. It's a beautiful place to figure out your connections, work with your spirit team. I've done personally in the last, since everything happened and I was finished the training, I've done a lot of ancestral work, both my soul ancestry and this life's ancestry. I've done a ton of work in the Akashic Records with this, and I meet my parents there often. They are often there pointing me in a direction. They're not always there. They'll point me down a way, but they won't always walk with me. And it has been like being in the Akashic Records alone is healing. When
Yeah.
I go into someone else's records in a session, I'm healing myself as well, just being in that dimensional space of knowledge. And so you're healing when you're in there, but also you're working on these deep seated, maybe belief systems or these deep seated wounds that come from maybe past lives, maybe ancestry in this life. And the more you work there, the more you are connecting to your spirit team, your ascended masters, that you're working with the masters, the guides, the guardians, the angels. So
Hmm.
it's a beautiful place to be.
There's an intense vibration, right? It's almost like it
Yeah.
pulls you
It's
and
very
it's
healing.
almost pulling from your core. That's the sense I get. And I think of it either like a card catalog or Gringotts where it's just this endless
This huge
room.
underground world.
Exactly, with files.
So it's interesting. I have been in my records, been going in and out of my records and other people's records for a long time, and always in integrity. And a lot of people when they guide you into there's a lot of people who guide you into the records through meditation and they bring you into a library.
What
For
is
the
it?
Okay, go
Sorry,
ahead.
start that again. I'll edit
Oh,
that out. That's my mother
yeah.
call.
Oh, Yeah, so what a lot of people, when you bring you into your records, and there's lots of meditations out there to bring into your records, they bring you into a specific space through guided visualization. And I have an issue with guided visualization. And I am a yoga nidra guide and I do guided visualization, but all of mine are very curiosity based. When people like someone, I once had someone try to walk me in. It was early on into like my records before I fully went into the training. And they had me they wanted me to find a library and books. But my records have never had books nor a library. Like it's never been there. I've had bohemian vibes. Yeah. Like lots of fabrics, textures, layers. Like that's where I vibe in the records. But
Hmm.
when you have someone like walking you into your records and they're having you look for a library, I think I think that some people will get there that way because for some people it looks that way. But
I was going to say they're projecting their own vision of what
yeah,
that is. And I think
yeah,
that's true of anything. And that's even with mediums. Every medium gets different, it gets their messages differently,
different ways.
right? Different imaging because it's based on your ability to identify
Yeah,
what that imagery is. So if I say, when I say I see a chain link, when a chain link has been untethered, to me, that's a break in a relationship.
yeah.
That may not be the same for somebody else. And it's not fair to assume that they can't be a real medium if they're not receiving that. All the things we receive as we are meant to perceive them because it's how we can digest them.
Yeah, yeah. I have that issue with guided visualization across the board because have you ever been in a guided visualization and they're like, you're in a forest and I immediately have a beautiful picture of a forest. And then they're like, and there's a stream. And I'm like, there's no fucking stream in my forest. And then I'm like, I have to start again because now I have to choose a different forest. That's where I go. Or they're like, the sun is bright. And I'm like, it's night. What are you talking about? Like, this is my forest is night. So when I have these things on Insight Timer called guided curiosities, where I just bring you into an environment and let you be as curious and I just ask questions because I feel like that's a great way to join, to ask a guide to bring you into your Akashic records and then to just open it up like a present and see what's there. But there are a lot of people who bring you in through meditation who do go into the library, the book. And it is a library and a book for
Mhm.
some people, but it's
Mhm.
just not for everyone. And to know that going in that space, and it vibrates very high. You're working with a lot of archangels in the records. And so you're in that energy.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I'm there, I'm being healed. If someone's there with you, you're being healed. You can get you can even get Reiki style healing up in from the records that will like work on you for a week at a time.
Yeah.
So there's really beautiful vibrations there. And it's a great way to connect in to like your whole support system, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think that's a great explanation. Hopefully, it makes it clear if anybody's going, "What the heck are Akashic
What are we
records?"
talking about? And
Yes.
people access them through their clair abilities or through knowing. And so it'll be, yeah. So every Akashic reader is different. Like I work,
Mhm.
what you'll hear from me, you could go to 3 readers in 1 week and you'll hear what they have to say to you. You'll hear what you need to hear from them. So it's interesting. And some people are visual, some people are knowers, some people hear things, some people, right? It's all different. And if you want to go into your own records, get a sense of what your clair ability is, right? For someone who's listening, just start to get really present in your own body, get really present and start to listen so that you can access your yes and no when you're in the records.
Yes. Oh, awesome. Awesome. All right, let's jump to human design because this is fairly new for me.
Sure. Yeah. Human design is awesome. I've been doing it for many years. I just got really intense after my parents died.
Yeah.
Human design is a mixture of I Ching, numerology, astrology, tree of life, Kabbalah, like every chakra system. And like, I think it was 1987 that it was channeled in by Rauru. And so so you do it like with a date. So like your birthday, time, month, place, right?
Mhm.
That's what you have to know for it. And it's just like a chart. So if you get your astrological chart, you're shown the circles and the houses in a clock-like formation. Your chart in human design is called a body graph. And it's basically set up in centers like chakra centers, but there's 9, there's not 7, because apparently they talk about the heart being split. And so there's actually 9 centers. And each center is either defined or undefined. And that has this is the simple human design to learn, because if you have an undefined solar plexus like I do, when a center is undefined, that means that you don't have constant access to it. So my solar plexus is my emotional center and it's undefined. I don't have access to my own. Every once in a while, the transit will define me a little bit and I'll have access to my emotions. And on those days, watch out to my husband, right? Because I'm like, I got a feeling today. I'm going on this today. If I had known this as a teenager, because as a teenager, I picked up on everybody else's emotions and amplified them, which is what an open solar plexus does. And I took them on as my own. And that's how I ended up in a domestic violence relationship for 5 years, because I took all of his things that he felt about himself and I applied it to me, thinking these were my feelings. Had I known this, if I'm for anyone out there, if you have teenagers, you should learn their human design chart, because it can help so much. And then also, so that is like not even the tip of the iceberg. In human design, you have a profile, you have a type, you have an incarnation cross, you have all the planets like you have them in astrology, but you also have conscious and unconscious. Because in human design, when the third trimester begins, that's when they say the soul enters the body. So you have those numbers. And then when you're actually born. So you have all of these elements. And then if you add to that gene key work, which is, I want to say ancillary. I don't know if ancillary is the right word, but it's adjacent, right, to the work. It's so many amazing levels of learning, but you don't even need to go into it. That's like fun. That's the birthday gift for someone, like go deep into a reading. But the necessity reading is your profile, your type, your defined and undefined centers, incarnation cross, because it tells you all about your purpose in life. If you have teenagers and they have already in their chart a strategy and an authority for life, so they know how to make decisions in their life. If you are a generator generator is not an easy one to use, but say you're a projector and you don't know, you have a child who's a projector and they're always tired, but say they go to public school. The reason they're always tired is because they're not meant to have 8-hour days. They're not meant to. They need to have spaces within their day. It's not that you have to take them out of public school, but you might be trying to help their schedule out so that they have breaks and rests in their day, because they're not supposed to think for 8 hours straight. It's not good for their energy. It's not good for who they are. And environments like school can be really overwhelming for that. So, if you look at like their chart, you can help them so much with entering into their life and becoming independent. So adults too, but there's so much information. And then you have gates and channels and here's the other thing. If you have like teenagers or even young kids, knowing if I have a open solar plexus and I have a teenager who has a defined solar plexus, who actually has access to their emotions all the time, because I live in a house where my husband has a defined and my youngest has a defined. Me and my oldest and my middle have undefined. So I make it a point when we all get frustrated. I'm like, who's frustrated? I know it's not Veronica, Cole, or me. Who's frustrated? Like, and it gives the person who is frustrated a chance to express it. It takes all the pressure off the two of them that don't have that. You know what I'm saying? So and it totally dissipates things. I even have a younger one who's a manifester. So I'm a generator. Generators fall asleep. That if you're working correctly in your energy, put your head to the pillow, you'll fall asleep. Manifest, and ever since my parents died, she sleeps in bed with us. And this kid is a manifester. Manifestors, they need 45 minutes to do nothing before they go to sleep. For the longest time, my husband was getting so frustrated with her. Go to sleep, because we're both generators. And we're like, let her go to sleep, our heads on the pillow. When we started looking into her manifestors, we realized she just needs to be 40 minutes, a half hour, 40 minutes, like just doodling or walking around before we jumped into bed. As soon as we did that, everything switched. Nighttime became so simple. It was like she hit the pillow when we hit the pillow. She just needed to be in the space for 30 to 45 minutes just to like decompress.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's these little beautiful nuggets that are so tangible for families, for people, right? They can be huge game changers. Huge. As a generator, I'm a sacral authority with response. So here's another simple example, and this is simple, but you could take it really big. I answer to yes or no questions. That's part of my design. Any generator who's a pure generator would. So my husband and I would go on date night and he'd be like, where do you want to go? And I'd be like, I don't know. And it would start date night out really weird because I'm like, why don't you just choose? Just choose a place. I don't even know. I don't care. Like, why is it always like this? And it would turn into something. When we started using yes or no questions actively and consciously, now he'll be like, do you want sushi? And I'll be like, yeah. Or I'll be like, no. And then he'll be like, if I say no, he'll be like, do you want salads? And I'll be like, yeah. And it's like a direct line. And it's using my voice to yes or no questions. Some generators might use or right. But
Yeah.
knowing if you have that response, that you need people to ask you yes. What if you have a child and you keep asking this child, how do you feel? What do you want? And they're a generator and all they need is for you to be like, yes or no questions. It's a huge pressure lifter.
Yeah.
It's like huge. So yeah, I could get really passionate about human design because I've seen it change many families around. So many people get frustrated with their kids and they go to the psychologist or the therapist and they get medications and they try to give them, they could put them through blood tests and all this other stuff. And it's just that they're not letting them be who they are. They're
Yeah.
parenting them from their type and their
Yeah.
profile, but they don't even know they have a type and a profile, right?
Yeah.
So
That's the problem too with our education system.
yeah,
Both I was a teacher in Canada, and it's the same for those I know in the profession in the US. We create this cookie cutter and we expect all kids to fit in the same size
yeah,
cookie. And if they don't fit, they're the problem.
give them something, fix them,
That makes no sense. How many people do
right?
we know fit in the same cookie cutter size? Right? It doesn't make sense. And I think that was part of my frustration and why I left the profession.
Yeah,
So it's too bad that something like human design couldn't be used within the confines of the education system. Because, like you said, when you know that a kid needs yes or no questions, how you test them and find out what they know is vastly different
yes,
than those who can produce
yes.
thorough
I
answers.
I had an inkling for a while. I'm like, every therapist should understand. They don't have to be a great human design reader. They should understand the types, the profiles, and the centers. Because if, as a therapist, you go to somebody to heal whatever you need to work on. But if that therapist doesn't understand that you're a yes or no, how many therapists ask, how do you feel about that? How many therapists do you go to and you think they can really, or they're somebody who think I'm a quad right, for example. A quad right's like, it's like the opposite of control and the opposite of focus. It's like just receiving and surrendering into life. And I remember I used to go to therapist. I went to for a while. I went to therapist just to. I was a therapist, so you got to go there too. And I would get so frustrated because they all wanted me to do these to-do lists and do all these things, and I didn't know I was a quad right at the time, so I didn't know what I was railing against. But now I understand it. So every therapist should have an understanding of their own design, their own profile. Okay, so this is how I do it, and they should have an understanding of who they're working with. Does that work for them? Because sometimes you have people who come to a therapist are in a vulnerable position. They're looking for help. And to have someone just put their design on you, that's not one day therapists will have an understanding of it.
Yes. Let's put it out there in the universe. A question, because your parents are showing me a maypole. Do you know what a maypole is?
Like where they put the ribbons
Yes.
around on the maple dance.
And what I'm getting from that is that your dad was the sturdy one and your mom was the whimsical, she was the energy that went around, and that's how they complemented each other. He was strong and sturdy and she was energetic and vibrant. Does that describe them well?
For sure. Also, my dad was like 6'5". My mom was like 5'4" too.
Then the pole also comes into play at that point.
Yeah, no, but he was a more social person. But yeah, he was trustworthy in all ways. The
And
best
by
person.
sturdy, I get just he was the one people would go to for strength and for reassurance almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my mom too had a lot of sturdiness to her, but yeah, she was always trying to figure life out in different ways.
I
So,
see a lot of colors around her, which
yeah.
is why I got the whimsical, the energetic, effervescent almost.
You
And
definitely wouldn't catch her in anything black or brown.
yeah, I mean, that's the sense I got. That's okay. That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
seeing the
Yeah.
color. And they're still within that sense, even in the spiritual form. And they complement each other really well. And that's, I think, where I got the 2 for 1, where
Yeah.
there are two as one, not two for one. Sounds like they were on sale. Um, the two as one, because they really are two spirits, but really linked and connected. And I'm getting the sense that it was through lifetimes they've been that connected, almost from like and I don't know much about twin flames, but I also hesitate in saying something like soulmate because there's so
Yeah.
much people throw that word around thinking that there's only one. But in their case, it has been that. They
Yeah.
have been each other's soulmate, as people used to say, Bay, B-A, the B-A-E, before all else. And that's really how they're coming through now as together. And it makes sense that they transition together as well.
Yeah.
Uh, it was just a decision, especially on your dad's part. They needed to be together. There was no way that he could survive not being with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. Absolutely. I
So
knew that.
definitely showing they still give a sense of being the head of the family, that they're watching over everybody, that they're guiding and maneuvering you as to where you all need to be. Is there one in your family that's a little maybe questioning in the direction they're heading or second guessing something?
Is as far as my kids?
I'm getting the
Or
sense that it's your kids. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if they think that far. I don't know, like, we homeschool and they unschool their lives, so they do whatever they want in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. I guess my oldest is thinking, like, what is she gonna do with her life? Because she's gonna be 15.
Okay. And they're saying she may need a bit more guidance with that,
Mm.
maybe a nudge here and there. There's a lack of confidence in her making a decision based on a desire,
Yeah.
feeling that either she doubts it or second guesses it or is thinking she might be judged for it. So that it's almost like she's holding back. So they're showing they
A little
want
shove.
a bit of a nudge. Yeah. And so wanting me to say that to you to help her, they're also
Yeah.
trying to help her, but just to gently push her in the direction, or at least supporting her in whatever that may be, so she feels free enough to make that decision on her own. But
Yeah.
definitely questioning happening in that regard.
Yeah.
Is your mom's mom passed?
Yes.
Okay. She's also coming through. She's showing me tea. Is there a tea set or something that is linked to her?
I wouldn't know. I know my parents had a T-set. I don't know if it came from them or I don't know if it came from my grandmother or not. I'm not sure because it was before I was around. And so we have like a whole china set, but I don't know if it came from that. Might have been a gift from them, from her to them at one point.
Okay,
But
'cause there's an importance in it. You may wanna look into it. Just and it's a way for her to signify that it is her part in something that was gifted to you or something that is within your reach, and just that it speaks of her. She doesn't wanna be forgotten.
oh yeah. Yeah. She's
And
not forgotten.
yeah, okay. It's just a reminder of, "Hey, I'm here. I'm still
Yeah.
here." And there's definitely a unification with her and your mom, but I'm getting the sense that she's a little on the outside. There's your Siri was gonna tell me something, that she's on the outside of that, and so it's just her way of saying, "Don't forget me. Do something in
Yeah.
remembrance of me."
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I have tons. I don't have any other grandparents alive. I'm the elder of the family. So there's my one grandmother was the only grandparent I had growing up, but yeah, she died when I was a teenager.
And there is and this is difficult for me, I don't get a lot of this. I know you mentioned the stillborn.
Hmm.
There is a child spirit coming through. They don't necessarily come through to me as a baby because they come through in a way that they can communicate with me. And what I'm getting from that is and this is often the case with a miscarriage or a stillborn, is that there's nothing you could have done to have changed the outcome. and that they weren't ready.
Mm.
They aborted, and sorry, wrong choice of words. They exited
Yeah.
uh, beforehand because it was the realization that they weren't yet ready to be earthbound.
Yeah.
They weren't ready to fulfill their contract.
Yeah. I know that he's around me. And I also feel like he came in to make my other children possible because he taught me about my body, something that happens when I'm pregnant. And so if he hadn't come in and given that to me, I wouldn't have any of my kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. They are around. And I say they because generally, especially with unborn, I never make the assumption of what the sex was unless it's really prevalent.
Mm.
But in saying he's saying that it was a path. There was a path that needed to be taken, and he needed to fulfill something for you, but just couldn't follow through with the agreement.
Yeah.
So there was something predetermined that you
Between us.
had arranged together. And so he's sorry that he didn't follow through, but he said it's not because he didn't love you. It had everything to do with he didn't feel ready for the adventure.
Yeah.
The adventure of being in human form. That is a strange way of putting it. That's how he put it. He wasn't ready for the adventure.
Yeah.
I don't know if that brings any kind of solace. It's really hard communicating, especially with young ones, just because it's not often that happens for me. I've helped people throughout the years with miscarriage and stuff like that, and on occasion, those spirits come through. So if I seem a little awkward, it's just because
Yeah.
it's new, it's fairly new territory. I'm used to hearing from spirits frequently, but when it's a child, and it affects me emotionally too. There's I can feel it in my heart,
Yeah.
sense of the sense of urgency that needs to be communicated. There's a desperation almost that they want to communicate that with you. And there's so much love, but yet there's the heartbreak of not being together in this life. And so it gets very emotional for me.
Yeah, that didn't deal with that for a very long time because it was so traumatic. It was like after I had the stillbirth, they almost inverted my uterus. And so I had to go for a DNC. I was thrown in and I didn't know what was happening. I woke up with ice chips and they tried to bring him out to me. And at the time, I said, no, I didn't know what was going on. I was totally in shock. And it was something I regretted for a really long time. And I had another baby. So I immediately threw everything I had into the next pregnancy. And I had so many problems with it because they scooped out so much of my uterus in the DNC that it was a constant anxiety for the first pregnancy. And so I hadn't dealt with it for the longest time. And it wasn't until like about maybe 8 months ago that I sat down, I did a soul art on it and I went into a journey. I talked to my teacher about it and we talked about imprints in life, that the souls make imprints and that I needed to finally hold my child. And I went on this trek and I went around this like reservoir. It was like circular and I held like a pillow to hold him. And I walked around like 3 times and just talking, saying everything. And I don't think I had felt his presence before I started doing that work, but now I feel it much more and much more regularly than I had.
Yeah. Good, good. Definitely around.
Yeah.
Definitely around. It's just there's things unsaid that he felt clear that needed to be said. Um, it's always beautiful to make those connections, but like I said, it also makes me emotional at the same
Yeah.
time. Throws me for a loop a little bit,
Yeah.
but in a good way, right? Like it's such a pleasure, and I guess this is a great way to wrap up as well because I always find it such an honor when spirits trust me to come through and trust me to pass on messages. And given your experiences and given what you do, in this world as well. So you totally get it, which can be a little
Yeah.
daunting for when we try to read each other and do things
Yeah.
to help each other. But I hope that it resonated with you. It brings you some comfort. And I do love all the information that you've brought to this episode because I think it's fascinating. It's a fascinating world for those of us who are in it. And I hope it's just as fascinating for those who are curious. What is this stuff? Because I think the more we talk about it and the more we put it out there, the more we give people the opportunity to tap in themselves and the more we have a chance at healing the world.
And everything that I do, I used as a tool through my grief. I don't I know it was my mom guiding me, showing me, "Try this, jump in this," and it was like it was through not only doing it for myself, but learning how to do it for others that I healed. I don't you're never fully healed, but I started to move the energy and start
Mhm.
to embrace it in a different way. And it's amazing, like, even something as, like, human design, which you wouldn't think you would use for grief. It brought me so much information
Mhm.
about the conditioning, how I grew up. Here I am, an orphan now. How do I accept that? I was an only child. I did everything for my parents, and now I have no one to do anything for. And
Yeah.
human design began to show me how I was dealing with the grief, how I was conditioned to be, right? I used that there. And then with Akashic Records, I got to really connect to them and start to build and develop my clair abilities so that all of a sudden I'm hearing them all the time and my dreams are
Mhm.
coming through and I'm getting signs all the time. And then the yoga nidra, like it just helped me to balance my nervous system to go even deeper into the Akashic Records and into soul art and whatever I do. So it's like each thing, it's amazing how many different things you can use to walk into your grief. And truly, when what I've realized is when with going through grief has been one of the biggest gifts for me, this grief
Mhm.
in particular. And I cry like like I will easily, like last night I was on a journey and I cried for, I think, an hour and a half straight. But it wasn't sadness.
Yeah.
It was just this touchingness. I don't know how to explain it. It's not like I'm
Mhm.
sobbing from sadness, but it's just coming out. And but I'm feeling like I can feel my parents. My eyes are closed. I may not be able to see them at that moment, but I can feel them. And so there's this beautiful gift in that. And this connection that's created when people die. There's a connection that I know now that they're around, they watch over my kids even more than I do. And it's like there's a beautiful gift in that. And when you can actually look at and hold hands with the grief and use it, because you know what? They're not coming back into this world when someone's gone. You might as well make your best of it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And use
Mhm.
it for the transformations that you want to create. And it's
Yeah.
weird to say that, but there is a joy in it. There is a strange, beautiful joy in it. You
There
know,
is.
I
And people are almost afraid
Mhm.
of using the word joy with grief.
Yeah. I got to have a feather literally land on my thigh today, and I was just sitting there, like, drinking and I was like I watched it, and I'm, like, watching it, and I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
There's these surprises. There's these beautiful
Yep.
places of joy, but you have to open to it, and if you open to joy, you do open to the sadness, and you do open to the anger. I still have I call it, like, washing over me. Sometimes the river gets really wide, and that's
Absolutely.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. We're here to feel things. That's how we
Yeah.
learn.
It ebbs and flows. And just as much as it may feel like you're drowning, the tide will release and you'll be able to breathe again. And
Yeah.
it's just it's having the tools to get through those times where you're barely keeping your head above water. And grief is a forever journey. I call it a life sentence.
Mm.
It gets easier, but it doesn't mean that there aren't times where something will just hit you like a ton of bricks. Just, you've got to be able to sit in it and know that this too shall pass and you'll find that joy again or the lesson in why it has come on or what triggered that or that we're in a constant state of learning. The thing that I tell my clients the most because they're so desperate to have those signs,
Yeah.
like, yeah, but I'm not seeing anything. I'm like, but are you stopping to watch or are you stopping to listen? And they usually don't know how to respond to that. And it's because we are, what's the old saying? A watched pot never boils.
Yeah.
Yeah. My advice to people, shut up and listen. How often do we just sit for 5 minutes in silence and say nothing and expect nothing, if we don't shut up and listen, how are we expecting those
But
messages to come through?
there's a conundrum in grief, and that is that we're very afraid of it. And when we get very afraid, we go into fight or flight. And when we're in fight or flight, our nervous system is totally unbalanced and we're not present in our body. But in order to feel the presence of our loved ones, you have to remain present in your body. So there's a
Yeah.
conundrum there. You
Yeah.
definitely have to teach yourself how to be you have to get to know yourself. You have to get curious with yourself and say,
Mhm.
oh, I wonder why I felt that, or I wonder, and take the time to get to know yourself. I've always said, to me, grief is the absolute loneliest emotion in the world. And I say that because you could have 9 sisters and brothers. They lose the same parent, but it's a different parent to each of them. There's no one else can go through it with you. It's like you have to do it alone. But yet, I find solace in the fact that it's universal.
Mhm.
Everybody feels grief. There's no one that's getting off this planet without grief.
Nope. And
And
that's what I say. If you haven't had an experience, consider yourself lucky, but start
yeah,
setting yourself up for it because it's inevitable. It will happen
it's
at some
inevitable.
point.
And it's universal. Even it just I spend a lot of time, like I do pay attention to world events and I grieve people dying across the world. Like I remain present with that. So if you haven't experienced that type of grief, playing with things that are going on all over the world can give you a clue in. It can bring you
Yes.
into the present of that. It can give you an echo of it to
Yeah.
work with if you're interested in it. But yeah, it's a universal. It is a one. I really feel like grief is part of our oneness, and in grief, it is a fertile soil for growth. So it's
Yeah.
if that is our oneness, right? Then, but we all just pass. It's so taboo. It's so taboo.
I love
I
what you
find
just
it.
said there. Grief is a fertile soil for growth.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm writing it down so I don't forget. I think that's a great note to end on. Grief is a fertile soil for growth. And ultimately, that's what we're here in human form to do is to grow,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
expand our thinking and to expand into enlightenment. So thank you so much. This has been such a fascinating conversation on so many levels. And I value and appreciate what you do. And I'm so grateful that you chose to come and be a guest and proclaim to the world what you do so that my audience gets to see that as well. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. This has been amazing.
Yeah.